Sometimes an event happens, something you've shared with us, listener, that just it stops you in your tracks. And this killing in Bangladesh, it feels like one of those
It
moments.
really does. It's deeply troubling.
Yeah. The death of Babish Chandra Roy, it feels like more than just a news item. It's like it pulls back a curtain on some really difficult things. So let's try and really dig into this, figure out the core of what happened, and importantly, why it's causing such strong reactions.
Absolutely, because the initial details are stark, aren't they? We're talking about a 58-year-old Hindu community leader, Babish Chandra Roy, in Dinajpur.
Mm-hmm.
He was the vice president for the Bairal unit of the Bangladesh Puja Ujjapan Parishad. So someone known, someone involved.
Right, embedded in the community.
Exactly. So our plan here is really to piece together, what happened moment by moment, look at India's quite forceful response, and then try to understand what this might signal about the broader situation for minorities there.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of connect the dots.
Okay, let's start right there. On the ground. We're in Basudapur village, Dinajpur district. That's quite a way northwest from Dhaka, right? About 330 kilometers.
Yeah, pretty far northwest. And this happened on Thursday, April 17th, 2025, mid-afternoon.
So what do we know about how it unfolded? It sounds like it escalated quickly.
It seems so. The timeline reported suggests around 4:30 p.m., Mr. Roy got a phone call.
Okay.
And there's a suspicion, that this call wasn't innocent. It might have been the perpetrators checking if he was actually hung,
Ah, okay. Like a setup.
potentially. Because then, just half an hour later, about 5 p.m., four men show up on two motorcycles.
And they just took him?
Reports say they grabbed him, forced him away from his home, and took him to a nearby village, Maribari.
Narabari. And what happened there? The accounts sound horrific.
They really do. The descriptions from local reports suggest an absolutely brutal beating.
Hmm.
I mean, some accounts say he was beaten so badly he was barely recognizable.
God, that speaks volumes about the intent, doesn't it?
It implies a level of violence that's, frankly, hard to comprehend. After this assault, they apparently dumped him back near his home. He was unconscious.
And he didn't make it.
Tragically, no. He died shortly after arriving on the hospital back in Dinajpur. The local police, the Bairal police station, they have confirmed a case has been filed. They say they're investigating.
An investigation is underway, but the act itself, it's just shocking. And obviously this wasn't going to stay quiet, was it? Especially given the context with India next door.
Not at all. India's reaction was swift and very public, not just quiet diplomacy.
When did that come?
Just 2 days later, April 19th, India's Ministry of External Affairs, the MEA, put out a statement on X, the social media platform.
And it was strongly worded.
Extremely. They used phrases like noted with distress the abduction and brutal killing. But the part that really jumped out was the accusation.
Which was?
They explicitly linked it to what they called a pattern of systematic persecution of Hindu minorities under the interim government.
Wow, systematic persecution. That's a very significant charge for one government to level at another.
It absolutely is. It implies this isn't just random violence, but something deliberate, ongoing.
Yeah.
That the violence, maybe discrimination, maybe neglect faced by Hindus isn't isolated but part of a trend.
So they're suggesting Roy's killing is a symptom, not just a one-off tragedy.
That seems to be the implication, yes.
Oh,
And they also pointedly mentioned perpetrators of previous attacks acting with impunity,
Yeah.
getting away with it, essentially.
right. Impunity is key there.
Definitely. And India's demand was clear. The interim government in Bangladesh needs to protect its minorities, especially Hindus. They were very careful not to draw comparisons elsewhere, just focusing on the situation in Bangladesh.
Okay, so India makes this strong statement. How did Bangladesh respond? Because often there's a pushback, isn't there?
There was. It seems Bangladesh tried to deflect a bit by pointing towards incidents involving minorities in West Bengal in India. Sort of a you have problems too kind of response.
Right, trying to draw a parallel. Did India accept that?
Not even slightly. The MEA spokesperson, Randir Jaiswal, came out on April 18th, actually the day before the MEA statement on X, perhaps responding to initial remarks, and he called it a barely disguised and disingenuous attempt to draw a parallel.
So a very direct rejection.
Very direct. He basically said, stop the virtue signaling and focus on protecting your own minorities. It was a clear message. Deal with your issues. Don't try to equate them with ours.
It really highlights the diplomatic tension, but also the vulnerability of minority communities that often gets caught in the middle of these exchanges.
Precisely. And we need to remember the context here in Bangladesh. The Hindu community is the largest religious minority.
What sort of numbers are we talking about?
Estimates vary, but generally around 8 to 10% of the population. So out of 170 million people, that's somewhere between, say, 13 and 17 million people. It's a significant number.
And historically, they've faced challenges.
Yes, there's a well-documented history. Issues like violence, land grabs, attacks on temples. These aren't new concerns. Groups like the Bangladesh Hindu Buddhist Christian Unity Council have been raising alarms for years.
So this killing of Bhavesh Chandra Roy, it doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Not at all. It lands right in the middle of this ongoing narrative of vulnerability. And it inevitably raises questions about the current interim government's effectiveness in providing security, especially since the political changes in 2024.
What's the feeling on the ground now in Dinajpur after something like this?
Reports suggest a very grim mood, understandably. Fear, anger, grief, especially among Hindu groups, but also wider civil society. Losing a community leader like this in such a brutal way.
It must send ripples of fear.
Absolutely. And it fuels demands for justice. There have been protests, calls for accountability, people want action. Outlets like the Daily Star provided quite detailed timelines, which really brings home the reality for people there.
It's such a disturbing picture. But as always, we need to be careful with interpretations, right? Especially that term systematic persecution.
Exactly. That's a crucial point of nuance. The core facts, the killing, India's strong statement, seem well corroborated by news reports and official channels. But interpreting systematic persecution is complex.
So while there's a pattern of incidents,
Yes, like the attacks during Durga Puja back in 2021, which were widespread. There's definitely a pattern of vulnerability and violence. But is there concrete proof of an official top-down government policy to persecute Hindus? That's harder to establish definitively.
it seems like India's strong language might be driven more by the pattern of violence and that sense of impunity we talked about.
I think that's likely a major factor. Yes, the recurrence of violence and the perception that perpetrators aren't being brought to justice. Effectively, that combination seems to be fueling the strong stance from Delhi.
So for someone listening, maybe geographically far away, why does this specific incident matter? Why should they pay attention?
Well, on one level, it's about fundamental human rights, isn't it? Minority rights, the duty of a state to protect all its citizens. That's a universal issue.
It transcends borders.
It does. And you see the real human cost. A grieving family, a community living in fear. It's about the consequences when that state protection feels absent or ineffective. Plus, the diplomatic fallout between two major South Asian neighbors like India and Bangladesh, that has regional implications. It's a situation worth watching.
It really is. This killing of Bhavesh Chandra Roy. It's just such a stark, brutal reminder, isn't it, of the fragility and the challenges that minority groups can face.
It truly is. So the key things to take away are the sheer brutality of the crime itself, India's incredibly strong reaction, using that very pointed phrase, systematic persecution, Bangladesh's attempt to push back, and all of this happening against that historical backdrop of vulnerability for Hindus in Bangladesh.
And it leaves us with a fundamental question, really. What is the absolute core responsibility of any government when it comes to guaranteeing the safety, the security of every single person living within its borders, regardless of their faith or background?
Yeah.
And what happens when that compact feels broken? It's complicated, no easy answers, but definitely something that warrants our attention and understanding. Staying informed on these things feels more important than ever.